Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This week we're going to learn the Maimer of Shabbos Pashas Maasei, Menachem, Tafshin Daled Mem. Due to technical difficulties, we don't have the Maimer up on the screen, but it's available on the internet. The Maimer of Eileh Maasei, Tafshin Daled Mem, and you can follow along or follow in the Sefer. This Maimer was set 40 years ago. This past Shabbos, we actually had Matas and Maasei together. 40 years ago, it was Matas and Maasei were separate, but it was, of course, Shabbos of Menachem this past Shabbos. And next week, God willing, we'll do the Maimer of Shabbos Chazoin. This week is Shabbos Chazoin, but we'll do it, God willing, we'll give it out on Sunday, the Lineder, and that will be the Maimer of Tzion B'Mishpat Poda, that Zion is redeemed with the judgment, meaning the study of Torah, and its captives, those that return, with charity. So that's apropos for the 9 days, and we'll do that Maimer too, although this Maimer also talks about that. Additionally, this Maimer speaks about our day-to-day life, and it gives us strength to overcome, and the Rebbe has, as always, a fundamental perspective and how the Torah is connected to our life and strengthens us in everything that we have to do. So let's begin. And when Matas and Maasei are together, like it was this year, so then this part is the middle of the Parsha. But the year that the Rebbe said this, Maasei was on its own, so that was the beginning of the Parsha. Eileh Maasei b'nei Yisrael sheyotzu me'eretz Mitzrayim b'yad Moshe, v'yichtiv Moshe es mitzaim u'Maaseim v'Eileh Maaseim u'mitzaim. These are the travels of the children of Israel, which left the land of Egypt by the hand of Moses. And Moses wrote, transcribed, their origination points, the source of their travels, to their travels. And these are their travels to each of the places that they went to, which was the source of their subsequent travels, and where they left and where they went to. And that's how the style that it's written from. They came to here, they left this place and they camped here. They left that place and went to the next place. The word source is, by definition, when something has left the source, then it can be a source. We know the general way of being particular in how we study this and all lessons of the Torah, which we could already understand from the discourses, the Mamorim of the Alter Rebbe and Likutei Torah, and the subsequent Rabbeim and their Mamorim. Why did the Torah take such lengths to describe to us the story of all the travels? It was that they traveled. We know they left Egypt, they went to Israel, it took them 40 years, whatever. And since the travels, the topic of the travels of the children of Israel is a part of the Torah of life, which is an eternal lesson, the Torah was commanded to us by Moses, and it's a heritage for the congregation of Jacob, meaning that the whole Torah belongs to each and every individual member of the children of Israel. It is a heritage for each and every Jew. That means that whatever it is about the travels has a special instruction, and it has content that will teach us a lesson in everything that we do. For each and every individual, for all time and in all place. I've mentioned other times, in all the Rebbe's over 1,500 Mamorim, in about 90%, it says explicitly, it's for all, it's for everybody, and all time. And if it doesn't say it explicitly, it's implicit. So the Maimer is something which is there not just as a discussion, but it also gives us power and strength for everything that we do. Sharei HaTorah hi nitzchis, because the Torah is eternal. V'lochin because of Moshe Samasois, and that's why Moshe transcribed the travels. Ki mizeh shelo miyuchedes v'avodas Adam, because from the travels we have a special lesson in how we serve God in our service, b'chol makom u'b'chol zman, for all, in every place and for all time. Gam yidu adiuk b'kama pratim b'lashon hakosov. Then the Rebbe says now in more particular fashion that we also know in some of the terms that the verses use. Mashakosov v'yichtav Moshe Matzeim u'Maasei. First thing is that it says that Moshe wrote their sources, their originations for their travels, and then it says, and these are their travels with the sources of the origin of the travels. So there's a redundancy here, seemingly, but of course everything in Torah is precise, so that I was going to explain why the Torah says it twice. We have a similar terminology regarding when we study the form and the shape, in other words, the building and the layout of the Holy Temple, of the Beis HaMikdash, which is also similar to the travels that has the place where it came and where it went to. Now, in Yecheskel, in the book of Ezekiel, which is customary to learn in the 3 weeks, in addition to the laws of the chosen house, meaning the temple by Maimonides, and the Mishnah that also speaks about the dimensions of the temple. It's customary to study now, so the Rebbe mentions it here particularly, and that we have the same term of moitzois, which is sources of where the measurement would be and where the measurement would come to. And that's the term that's used in Ezekiel. It's you could see it's in chapter 43, verse 11. So, why, first of all, why does the Torah say that Moshe transcribed it? Happens to be Moshe wrote the whole Torah. But they call Torah nichtav al Moshe. V'chein ma'al kefel haloshon v'yichtav. And why the redundancy? Why is it doubled over? Why does it say? And he wrote their origins to the travels, and these are the travels with the origins. And then why does he say? He changes the order. First it says that where they left to their travels, and others the origins of the travels, and then it says the travels and the origins. Well, so to understand all this, we have to have as an introduction an explanation on the general idea of the travels. We know what the Medrash says. So that when they come to the Holy Land, they will find the houses which are full of all good. The Medrash there, it says a Medrash in several places. Started with the Mechilta, the beginning of Beshalach, and it's in Sifri and Akev, it's in Tanchuma, it's in several places. The Medrash says that when the nations of Canaan, the 7 nations that lived in Canaan, heard that the Jews are on their way, they said, you know what? We don't want to give them anything. If they're going to come, let them have a lousy place. So it says they destroyed their houses and they messed up the land and they burnt land and they really messed things up. So now God made them stick around for 40 years. They said, they're not coming. So they rebuilt their place, and by the time they went into Israel 40 years later, then they found a very habitable land that was already once again rebuilt, etc. So that's one of the reasons that we have these travels. But let's just say if they came right away, then they wouldn't even have time to destroy it. We wouldn't have had this problem in the first place. So if they would have left Egypt and came immediately there to like Rashi says explicitly that this whole thing could have taken 3 days. They wouldn't have had time to mess it up even. This whole story that happened, as the time went on. So why would they have to have all these travels? All the stations, all the travels. The oid, from this that the Torah goes to great lengths to tell us about the travels, this proves that the travels is not just to continue what happened before, as this is the rest of the story. Or a preparation of what's going to be afterwards. It's its own standalone topic, the idea of the travels. Has its own content, its own lessons for itself. To be a part of Torah, it has to teach us a lesson, and the Rebbe will go into what that is. And we also understand, in a deeper sense, in its inward part, the whole idea of traveling in the desert was the idea of refining the world, and as we have to do it in a spiritual sense. But this also needs an explanation, begs for explanation. You can only refine a place that is habitable, so where people can live. But most of the travels were in the desert, where people didn't live. It wasn't habitable. Like it says right in the beginning of the Haftarah of Diri Yirmiyahu that we read on the second Shabbos of the 3 weeks, and there it says explicitly that nobody lived there. You were in the desert where no one lived. Most of the travels was in the desert, besides the few where they actually had a war with some of the nations, etc. So we can understand this according to the fundamental principle that we all know, that the ultimate purpose and goal and intent of the creation is that God lusted to have for himself a dwelling place here in the lowest realms. Not just that in the world should be refined and cleansed and elevated. This world will be a place where God would himself dwell. His essence would dwell in this world. Just like somebody who lives in a place, everything they have, they're in their house. They can be in their skivvies, their PJs, because you're comfortable in your house. That's where you live. It's your essence, who you are. Same thing with the supernal one. That the dwelling is for his essence, his whole, all of him. And this dwelling has to be in the lowest realms, specifically in the lowest realm. It doesn't mean the lowest place on earth, the lowest part below sea level. It means in the lowest type of level. In other words, in the most coarse place. That has to be refined so that it be a place for God. Whether it means negating, doing certain things, or bringing holiness and doing what has to be done. Whatever is the highest could fall the lowest. So therefore, those places that are really in the lowest level here really are rooted in a very high source supernally. Like we've said this example many times. The brick wall, if the wall falls down, the highest bricks fall the furthest away from the wall. That means in the lowest realms is where the highest sparks are to That's why it's the lowest places that become the dwelling place for God, for His essence. And we already spoke about this a few weeks ago too. For this, the soul went down from a high peak to the lowest pit. In other words, we like we spoke in that minor, that the soul was in a very high spot to start with. It came to the very lowest spot, so that it is elevated and it elevates the whole world, etc. In order to refine the world, to cleanse it, to purify it, and to elevate it. Until the world becomes a dwelling place for God, may He be blessed for Him and His essence. And since this is the task of the human being, to make a dwelling place for God in the lowest realm, so what is the intent? Like we mentioned, not just to refine the world, to cleanse it, purify it, and elevate it. To turn it into a place where He could dwell. And here He says it again. Take out the yellow markers. That in order for each and every individual to have the strength and the power to turn the world, this lowly world, into a dwelling place for the essence of God, may be blessed. So quite simply, we have to have special powers given to us, special strength to do this. This is to be given from above. And like it says in the Talmud, and it's actually quoted, we just read it recently in the Tanya also, that God helps out. The Holy One, blessed be He, helps him. And if not, then we wouldn't be able to do it. In other words, there's a lot of tough challenges. And it's the help of God that gets us to overcome them, if we only want to. And it's not just that he serves the way he's supposed to serve, and the Holy One, blessed be, helps him. In the first place, originally, there has to be the refinement, the cleansing and purification of the lower realms from above. So after God, so to speak, does this cleansing and refinement, then the person can come along with his service and turn the world into a dwelling place for God's essence. With this we can understand what was this refinement that happened with the 42 travels that were in the desert. 42 places that are enumerated in that part, in the Parsha. Even though many of the places were desolate, it was in the desert. There weren't nations of the world, so you could say what was being refined over there. The whole idea of the desert is that it's the source of the klippa. That's the lowest realm. The klippa means the shell, the evil, the opposite, the opposing side to the holiness. And like it's known, Kabbalistically and according to Chassidus, who explains this regarding the verse that we're going to read in a couple of weeks, that it says if you traveled in a place in the great desert, the vast desert, which is full of snakes and serpents and scorpions, the koyal gimel klippas atmeis, that refers to the three totally impure klippas that cannot be elevated. And the fourth thing that it says there, there was a vast thirst. Koyal klippa revi, that's on the fourth klippa. That's what we know as klippas noiga, the neutral klippa, that can be elevated or can be brought down. Before the children of Israel can begin to make a dwelling place for his essence, there had to be a subjugation, to subdue, in a general sense, and some action had to be taken in the desert, which was the source of all of these klippas, that we'll have to then persevere in them later on. So in order that the person should have strength to do his part of his service, so God took us to the desert, and that gave us the strength through all these years to persevere in whatever challenges that we have. And that's why the children of Israel went in the desert, 42 travels. Now what happened in those travels? Moshe was at their head. Like the Medrash tells us that the Ark of the Covenant, one of the things was that it had a miraculous power, and it used to actually kill the serpents and the snakes that were slithering rampantly in a dangerous way. And one of the things was how they were protected was with the Ark. That's the idea of subduing the source of the klippa of the other side, so to speak, the opposite side of the holiness, the shell. And through this being as the introduction, as what happened first to introduce us, and this comes from the supernal levels, supernal strength, the way God does this, that the source of the klippas was subdued. Every single individual person can then serve his personal challenge. And the Rebbe says, because what's tough for one might be easy for someone else. But everyone has struggles, everyone has challenges, everyone has obstacles, but we also all have the strength. And God gave this to us when we were as a people in the desert, and living there for 40 years. So that gave us the strength, so that we can turn this world into a dwelling place for God. And since the travels in the desert are what gives us the strength, the service of each and every child of the people of Israel, all of the generations, to make this dwelling place for God. That means that the way we make this dwelling place has to be something along the lines of how it was with the travels. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu goes to great lengths to write all 42 stops, all 42 parts of the travels. And he signed it. Like the Rebbe says in the this, when it says Moses wrote it, he also signed off on it, so to speak. That already shows us and illustrates and symbolizes that in what we do, when we make a dwelling place for God, that has to be, our service has to be similar to the 42 travels. And it's like it's brought in the name of the Holy Baal Shem Tov. Everybody goes through for these 42 stations throughout their life. And the first stop is the Exodus from Egypt, right? The first travel. That's when you're born into the era of the world. When one is born, that's like they left Egypt. The first travel of leaving Egypt. Before, during the gestation period, that's like the time that the Jews were in Egypt, and exile. Because like we know, the exile is like the pregnancy, like the gestation period of a child before they're born. And the Geula, the redemption, is of course like the birth. So then a child is very limited, obviously, when they are in utero. Then they come out into the world. Then they go through these 42 travels. Till you come to the level of the good and broad land. Now, this of course ultimately means with the coming of Mashiach. And in the other sense, it means after a complete lifetime, they go to the continuation of life. And similarly, the whole time the nation of Israel is always going through the 42 travels the whole time. That includes the final exile, which is connected to this period of these 3 weeks, when we are marking the destruction and with yearning towards the rebuilding of the temple. Their goal is to come to the broad good land, which is Transjordan, the other side of the Jordan River in Jericho. Now, the Jericho's Yericho is also a reference to Moshiach. Gilui HaMashiach she'inyanehu b'chinas Yericho. The revelation of Mashiach, which that is the idea of Yericho, Jericho. Why? Because regarding Mashiach, it says, and of course in Isaiah, V'hariche b'yiras Hashem. And he will be able to, even with a sense of smell, bring about the fear of heaven. And actually the Talmud says he's able to smell and judge. In other words, it's in a much deeper sense. And that comes from the same root and source as the word Yericho, Jericho. V'zehu Eileh Maasei b'nei Yisrael. So this is the whole idea of that verse, that these are the travels of the children of Israel who left the land of Egypt, and Moses transcribed their origins and their travels. The Eileh Maasei, these are the travels, that's the travels, that they went in the desert to subdue the klippos. They went in that's going out to meet the challenges. What gives us the strength? The fact that Moses transcribed it. Moses wrote it. Moses wrote the origins and the travels. The origins, that really alludes to and hints at the source and the origin and the root of all the souls of Israel. The root of the souls of Israel are extremely supernal, very high. It's not just that God thought about us in his brain, so to speak, but we were part of the brain. We're rooted in his essence and his makeup, what he is. So we're just part of that. The Shadish, it's the source and the root for the source and the root. How's that sound? And Moshe was the one who brought along the king. Just like at the wedding, somebody brings you along, and not just an escort, and not just the best man, so to speak, but the one who brings it along. Now, the Rebbe says, king doesn't go himself, to low places. He sends somebody, sends important people. So Moses was the one. So Moses was this representative of the king. He drew down and brought down godly things from the supernal realms to the lower worlds. And amongst Israel, his what he did was that he drew down from the source and from the root and the source of the soul, their origin. To the soul the way it's over here. So the soul the way it's up there was very fine, it's godly, and then the way it comes down here, it has to get in touch with its source. Here it's animating the body, etc., but it's fused with the body and the animal soul. So it has a lot of work to do. And Moshe brings down the from the root source to the neshama as it is here, Maasei for the travels. So from the root, from the origin to the travels. And then Moshe then gives us the power and strength to do what we have to do in our service to God. And that's why he has to repeat itself. And these are the travels for the origins. After we get the power, after we are empowered from above, then we have to have the way we serve from below to above to elevate everything. That's why the order is changed. It says their travels to the origins. First, we got the strength from the origin to the travels, and then we go from the travels, we bring it back up. By days of through this, we fulfill the ultimate and the goal and the purpose of the creation. This is active at this moment. Moshe's strength. And here the Rebbe gives it to us. He's the Moshe in our generation who encourages us and gives us this strength to persevere. The Moshe Rabbeinu, his deeds and actions regarding the Torah, with the Torah, made him have ownership of the Torah, so to speak. The Moshe Rabbeinu like it says in Malachi, remember the Torah of Moshe, my servant. Why is the Torah called the Torah of Moshe? It's the Torah of God. But because Moshe Rabbeinu, because he had self-sacrifice for it, it's called Moshe's Torah. It's called by his name. Therefore, he continuously affects in every person, everyone in the nation of Israel, a continuous giving of strength, a continuous source of power from above. And through this, that turns into the service and the elevation from below to above. And this is the Rebbe guiding us and showing us this, which therefore gives us the strength. And how the Rebbe finishes off, the Ratzon may be the will of God. Even us learning this. Since we know that, of course, learning is great because it brings to action. That's why is learning greater? Only because it brings to action, which is a discussion we've had many times. So the greatness of the learning is the action. So the action is great because it's a result of the learning. The greatness of the study. The study is considered greater because it brings about some special things. So through us studying this, there's another thing in Maasei we'll get to the action, the deed. Actually, so will come to the Jordan and Jericho. Wow, this is also pertinent now. It should be strong in Eretz Yisrael and safe, etc. And when we get to the Jordan and Yericho, what is that? Bechinas Mashiach, the idea of Mashiach, immediately we are redeemed. Those that are reposing in dust will once again arise and rejoice. Moses amongst them. The Geula in the great redemption, through David, King Mashiach, speedily in our days, actually, l'chaim.